concept of lunch and learns, way to bring people together, to bring in lived experience and learned experience. People who have gone to college and schooling to be able to help individuals with difficult topics as we bring up, and then people with lived experience, really coming together. And then we come together as one to kind of have a bit of a conversation about this topic. So, what I guess the way this will work um, is that we'll ask everybody to remain on mute. Um, and hang on one second here. If you have questions, to please put them over in chat. And towards the end of our speaker speaking, she will engage in the chat discussions over to the side. Um, After a lot of requests to bring this back, we are back in business here with our lunch and learns, and we are planning to do our lunch and learns again every other month this year. Um, we we're working on planning another one for April, so please stay tuned with us. Either follow us through Eventbrite, or you can sign up for our mailing list on our website, robinshope.com. You can follow us on Facebook, um, and feel free to share our information. We offer groups 6 days a week to where people are coming together to support one another. Various different topics. We do check-ins 5 days a week, and things like boundaries and looking at books, Brene Brown's work, and Body Keeps the Score. All kinds of different topics that we have in our groups, and anybody is welcome to join, and it doesn't cost anything. Find more information about that on robinshope.com as well. We want you to keep your safety in mind. This is a tough topic, and please use grounding tools, coping skills, whatever you need. You're welcome to step out and step back in, whatever you need. Um, we just want you to take care of yourself. And then I think that's it for this part of it. I want to welcome Melissa to our virtual stage. Melissa Early is a survivor of domestic minor sex trafficking who has dedicated her life to working in healthcare. She earned her National Registry certification as a paramedic at the Medical College of Virginia and her Bachelor of Science in Nursing from Virginia Commonwealth University. Choosing to devote much of her career to child and adolescent behavioral health afforded her the opportunity to register with the Board of Counseling as a qualified mental health professional. Child. Ms. Early is also a national healthcare disaster professional, board certified by the ANCC. Ms. Early has been involved in advocacy at the level of the state legislature for decades. To date, she considers her greatest achievement as an advocate notifying her main perpetrator's wife after learning that her perpetrator had 3 young children, all girls, about his history. His wife confirmed the information and was able to safely leave the marriage and prevent further contact with the children. Ms. Early has used her past experience to educate and train various organizations and groups in order to raise awareness of human trafficking and to give the unique perspective of a survivor through the lens of the healthcare provider. And I will bring Ms. Early to the stage. Welcome, Melissa, and thank you for
Thank
being
you.
here.
Wow, I sound like I'm pretty awesome when you read all that stuff. Hi, everybody. I'm just going to jump right into the presentation. If you have any questions as I go along, if you can just drop them in the chat, and we'll have time at the end to answer questions. Because if I answer them as we go along, we'll never end. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and hopefully it'll work right the first time. have to use sound effects. All right, how's it look? Thumbs up? Awesome. Okay, so the title of today's presentation is, what do you mean I was trafficked? And basically, we're going to be talking about kind of the circumstances that people don't really think about as being human trafficking. You know who the host is, and you just learned everything there is to know about me. I have no disclaimers, and Heather just talked about that the content is potentially sensitive to some folks, and have a plan if you happen to get triggered by anything. Today we'll be exploring what human trafficking looks like hidden in plain sight. Recent years and recent, it's probably about the past decade or decade and a half, public awareness of human trafficking has increased significantly. There's a lot of things that go into that. There's been a lot of media attention. You see a lot of things on social media about it. There are, like, the Super Bowl recently was just on TV, and the Super Bowl, believe it or not, is a huge place where trafficking occurs, and there's typically many arrests during that time, and many folks are saved from trafficking during that time. And it's not something that people typically think about, but when you have a large gathering of, like, a sports gathering that is majority of males, and not that females can't be perpetrators or participants in trafficking, but that tends to be a place where you find a lot of activity, and there's media coverage of that, and despite, like, the increased awareness, there are still a lot of misconceptions about, you know, what human trafficking is and what it isn't, as well as, you know, something that would be considered trafficking, but most people wouldn't think of it as that. Today we're going to learn the definition of trafficking, like the legalese part, what is not considered trafficking, the things like I just talked about that are often not perceived, and we're going to leave you with some resources. Okay, so this is teeny tiny, and you guys might not be able to see it. So the definition, which I'm going to go ahead and read, I'm going to have to move you guys to the other side of the screen to do this. Hold on tight. Here we go. Human trafficking occurs when a trafficker uses force, fraud, or coercion to compel another person to perform labor or engage in a commercial sex act with the intent to profit at the expense of their victims. The United States considers trafficking in persons, human trafficking, and modern slavery to be interchangeable umbrella terms that refer to both sex and labor trafficking. The TVPA describes this compelled service using a variety of terms, including involuntary servitude, slavery or slavery-like practices, debt bondage, and forced labor. So human trafficking includes, you know, making somebody work against their will, as well as human sex trafficking. So there's both of those. And then at the bottom, I put that they talk about severe forms of trafficking in persons as sex trafficking, in which a commercial sex act is induced by force, fraud, all that stuff we mentioned before. When someone has not attained 18 years of age, and then the recruitment, harboring, transportation, and and basically they give the whole definition of what is above, but they only include for the human sex trafficking if somebody hasn't reached the age of 18. And those are the severe forms of trafficking. Well, I don't agree with the differentiation of severe and not severe, only being that if someone's reached the age of 18, then it's not severe trafficking for sex trafficking. And I wanted to put that in there just because that's like a section of our government that is saying that, you know, it's not severe sex trafficking if you're forced into this and you're already have turned 18. So those are some of the things that advocacy and groups are working on. Down there in the fine print, it says a victim need not be physically transported from one location to another for the crime to fall within this definition. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit. Here are some things. I'm okay. Here are some things that are not considered trafficking. Sexual abuse, that some examples would be, you know, within a family unit, if it were like a coach and the athlete, something like that. Even if they're told, you know, this, you can't tell anybody, you know, we'll both get in trouble, kind of thing, because there's no like currency kind of involved. Migrant smuggling, they're being brought across a border of a country to do work, but the person is typically a willing participant. Rape or any type of forced sexual act when the perpetrator does not benefit financially. Molestation, sexual harassment, prostitution when the individual is willing and capable of choosing to exchange sexual acts for monetary compensation. And then I don't know why I put other situations, because that's kind of vague, but yeah, other stuff, you know, just other stuff. But pretty much this list gives you an idea of what is not trafficking. It's basically when someone is either doesn't profit from something that they force on someone, or the individual is a willing participant. And yeah, so keep having to move y'all. Things that are often not perceived as trafficking. When the individual being trafficked goes home every day. When there is a perception that the individual is gaining from the activity, and the SUD is substance use disorder. Take, for example, that maybe I have a substance use disorder and I don't have any money to get to buy my substance of choice, and my supplier says, well, I tell you what, you know, I have a friend, and if you have sex with this friend, I'll give you, you know, your fix for today. And then that happens the next day and the next day. And basically they're having to use their body for currency, and it isn't something that they're being coerced by the fact that that person knows that they can't go without that drug, that they can't, you know, if it's, you know, they have to have that opioid every day, and they're using that to force them to have sex with people. And the likelihood is that those people are paying that dealer to have sex with that individual. So oftentimes it's looked upon, you know, that, well, they're choosing to do that because they're choosing to use substances, but, you know, there comes a time when it's no longer a choice. It's a physical and psychological need, and it's complicated, I guess, is the best way to put it. But that would be considered trafficking, and it's often not perceived that way. When the individual believes that their perpetrator is in a transactional relationship with their perpetrator, that means with them. And that's the term for that is trauma bonding, which is a topic for a whole nother day. But often what can happen is that for many different reasons, that someone that is being that is a victim of human sex trafficking, they will either become submissive to their perpetrator, because if they give in, and it's called fawning for anybody that wants to know the term, if they give in, then they aren't subjected to the punishment. And then after a while, it becomes like a reward for them to not get punished, and the trauma response in the brain causes a bond with that person. Or, you know, any attention is you know, some attention is good attention, whether it's you know, positive or negative, that kind of thing. And you know, it can be perceived as, you know, oh, this is my boyfriend, you know, and when somebody, you know, says that, they don't mention the part that, you know, I want my boyfriend to be happy, so I, you know, go to motels and engage in sexual activities so that, you know, we can have nice things. And that is trafficking, and the individual may not know it, and anybody that, you know, would see their relationship would have no idea. I do know what the other is in this case, and we're going to get to that. So I put this picture here because I was a damn cute kid. That is actually me at about age 2-ish. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story and kind of the revelation and the realization when it occurred that I realized that I had been trafficked. When I was older than this, thank goodness, I was probably first grade-ish. Next door neighbor paid a lot of attention to me, and I didn't get a whole lot of attention at home because everybody was busy, etc. And you know, I liked the attention, and at first it wasn't, you know, any sort of, you know, physical or anything that felt bad or anything like that. And Easter of first grade, I was outside in a dress. I skinned my knee. He says, I'll take care of that for you. And that was the first time that there was any physical contact, any actual sexual type of contact. That progressed over the next several years into him selling me over and over and over again for sex. And but I went home every day. I went to school. I participated in sports, and I chose to go over there every day. That's was my mindset. It wasn't until I was in my 30s, I guess. And I was watching a show on TV, and it was one of those like news stories. And there was a person by the name of Teresa Flores, and it's okay for me to say her name because she was on TV, and she was talking about her situation, and she was like, I was in high school, and there was this boy, and he started paying attention to me, and he asked me to go out with him, and we started spending time together, and she had her first sexual experience with him, and she didn't know that his friend was hidden and taking pictures of their experience. And the next thing that happened was he was using those pictures to blackmail her, and said that he was going to show them all over school if she didn't have sex with his friends. And it escalated into, well, if you don't keep coming, sneaking out at night, I'm going to show them to your mother, and then I'm going to tell her that you've been sneaking out at night. And she was just terrified that all this information was going to come out, and her life was going to be ruined. And when she said that that was her story of being trafficked, I was like, this huge light bulb went off. And it's like, well, if that was trafficking, and she went home every day, and she wasn't pushed out that window every night. I walked next door. Then what happened to me was trafficking. And it took a while to kind of wrap my head around that and this was like in the 70s, and there was no internet, there weren't cell phones there. I have no idea how the network worked and how all the connections were made, but it was trafficking. And I think that it's really important to have this kind of information out there, because there's right now kids are spending so much time on the computer. Like almost I was telling Heather and Jennifer before you guys came on that I was going to tell y'all, if you were closer than 6 feet to your screen, you needed to put a mask on, because everybody's eyes are probably like ruined from so much screen time. But the amount of time that kids are on the computer, it's almost impossible to control everything that they're viewing and who is viewing them. And it's really, really scary who can reach out to them and how. And when pictures get posted on Facebook, like, you may think it's an innocent picture, and like this picture, damn cute kid, but I'm fully clothed, and parents may think it's cute to put a picture of their child, the bathtub with the suds pictures and things like that, and perpetrators snatch those pictures up, and they end up selling them, and it's just a crazy world out there, and you know, there's just a lot of things that need to be monitored and looked out for, because something that you may not, like, nobody had any idea what was going on with me. It's like I don't know how a 6, 7, 8-year old managed to live a double life, but I did. And you know, those are the kinds of things that happen every single day, and probably a lot more so now than when I was a kid. So um, definitely happens. And so we're about halfway through our hour, so I think it's a good time for questions. And I'm going to go ahead and put the resources up while we're answering questions. So Heather, you got any questions for me?
Not so far. There was a question, is that Stockholm syndrome?
Yes.
Yeah.
And if you, I mean, how many participants do we have?
Oh, 33.
I mean, if anybody wants to unmute and just ask a question instead of putting it in the chat, that's fine.
Hello. Hi.
Hi.
Can you hear me? Hi. Okay.
Yes.
So before seeing that woman on television, what was your own perception of what had happened to you?
By that time, I knew that I had been abused, that I was a victim of, you know, sexual abuse, but I didn't look at it as trafficking. You know, in my mind, I saw trafficking as, you know, people being brought in, you know, and being held in a basement, or, you know, being, you know, held captive and things like that. That was my view of what trafficking was. Like, it involved, you know, a vehicle and then captivity kind of thing. When in reality, it's anybody that's coerced or forced, and the other person benefits from it.
And then we also had a question, how were you able to get out of danger?
When I was heading into middle school, so after about, I guess, 6 years or so, two things happened. One, I found it was a kind of a family business, I guess would be the best way to put it. One day when I went next door, I found not the main perpetrator, but his brother at the top of the steps. He had attempted suicide, and that kind of stopped things for a few days. And then during that few days, I committed a crime and got arrested. And it was through getting arrested that I was able to kind of reach out to the judge, not really by saying anything, but just by him looking at, you know, how many times I'd been suspended from school, you know, because I was using behaviors. I was acting out, you know, it's like, you know, here I am, I'm throwing shit in school, help me, kind of thing, you know, because as a kid, usually the words aren't there, you know, the tools of knowing how to say I'm in trouble aren't there, so you get in trouble. And that's how I was able to get out. That the judge kind of was like, wow, something's going on here. And he sent me to Virginia Treatment Center for Children for a couple years.
Okay, we have another question. Did your perpetrator ever get convicted?
No. I didn't tell anybody. When I was at VTCC, at that time, that was like in 80, 81, 82, whatever. It's a whole different world than it is now. And I told about my dad abusing me physically, and I was actually punished because I was on a weekend home visit, and I walked from the west end of Henrico downtown, and I got in trouble for leaving my home visit versus being I was supported by staff, but not by my psychiatrist. And so there was no way I was going to talk about anything worse than the physical abuse. And then I kind of buried it after that. It was like through my teenage years, it was just like, well, this really didn't happen. It really didn't happen. And then it wasn't until my first attempt at a gynecological exam that it all kind of came rushing back. And someone else who was involved in this trafficking ring, I guess you'd call it, reached out to me because I ended up in the psychiatric hospital and confirmed stuff. But he had moved out of the father had died. He moved out of the state, and everybody else had scattered. But yeah, so nobody ever got arrested, as far as I know.
Okay. We have, what would you say to family members and friends who post pictures on Facebook?
I actually do say stuff to them, and it's kind of a delicate subject because sometimes people get very defensive and things like that, but I would rather have somebody, get defensive and maybe plant the seed. But I usually say, I think, I love seeing pictures of your kids. They're adorable, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know if you've ever heard about, predators scanning Facebook and looking for pictures of kids that, are partially unclothed or even, fully unclothed. It's a thing, and it happens, and they'll end up on child porn sites. And I'm not saying that's going to happen with your kids' pictures, but it's just something to really, really think about when you're deciding which pictures to post. And usually if I put it that way versus, oh my God, I can't believe you put a picture of your kid's butt on Facebook. If it's like I'm putting it out there, what really does happen, and saying, I don't know if you know about this, but, and then it puts the choice back in there, and it's very non-judgmental, not accusatory, because you would hope that you could, put a cute picture of your kid takes off outside where you're dressing them for the snow in their snow boots and their coat and nothing else because they're so excited. But you can't, because there are predators out there.
Okay. I see Shelly McBeath has her hand up, but first I want to let Jenny, she's going to come off mute and ask her question, and then I'll get to that one.
You were mentioning that, or I can't remember, someone mentioned how, you don't know how you kept doing it without realizing what was happening. And I just wondered if that was if you think that's part of the, just based on my own experiences as a child, and if that's not the ability of a child to rationalize the irrational, to like impose parameters that make zero sense to an adult, but provide order to a child's world. Like you said, I was getting attention. I was otherwise, just not getting what I needed at home. And this was something for me that, it's very insidious, and it's not something you realize. And just remembering how good I was at compartmentalizing and rationalizing. And I didn't know if that's, one of the things that, I'm not going to say makes it easy, but a skilled predator can easily prey upon.
That's an excellent question. One of the things that I think that a skilled predator, and that's a really good way to put it, that they kind of look for is, a kid that's not really connected. A kid, like, for instance, like me, where, I'm that latchkey kid at a very young age. And, they notice the kids that parents aren't around, and that are, out on their bike at 9 o'clock at night and things like that. And so they're easy prey. And through the grooming process, the grooming is all, shower the gifts and be nice and the praise and all of that kind of stuff. But then the keeping process is, for me, it was threats. I'm going to kill your family. And, well, first I was good. He said that he was going to kill my dog. And then when I was like, I don't want to do this, he killed my dog. I was like, okay, this is real. And, when there was no dog to kill, he said, I'm going to kill your family. And so it was threats and continually escalating threats. And you believe it because there's evidence that it's real. And when you're a kid, it doesn't take much to scare a kid. And because of like what you mentioned about the difference between a kid, what is reality to a kid versus the rationalization piece that an adult can do. For a kid, perception is reality. And even, I mean, that's true for some adults, but, adults, you can, show, they can, research and, kind of change that perception. But with kids, perception is reality. And if you, talk about monsters under the bed long enough, then their perception is there are monsters under the bed, and good luck convincing them that they're not there, that's the reality. And, feeling like that if I didn't go over there, bad things were going to happen, when truly the reality was, if I did go over, bad things were going to happen. But my reality was the opposite. Does that answer your question, or does that make sense?
It does. And I think I was asking, I was trying to remember the comment, but it was your comment about I went to school and I participated in sports.
That kind of
that's what I mean about the compartmentalization. You're like, this is my reality now, and this is my reality when I'm at school. And this is, and then if, you said that the behaviors started to unravel, but the kids still cling to that sense of, no, I'm going to impose safety wherever I can until they simply can't. And I think, yeah.
And I knew I couldn't tell, but I got arrested and put somewhere that I couldn't get out, which meant he couldn't get in.
We have a question, Shelley McBee. You're welcome to come off of mute.
Good morning. Okay, so my question is kind of heavy. And just this last year, I realized I was trafficked. I actually engaged in survival sex at the age of 20. But it goes way back to when I was little and different perpetrators coming in my home. And then at the age of 11, my mother's boyfriend used to be a pimp and groomed me and taught me, right? But that process got interrupted, and thankfully. But still, the age of 20, I find myself survival sex. So here's a question for you. You say molestation and sexual abuse and rape are not considered trafficking, but what about the many victims that start from a young age in the family, being trained by family friends or uncles or what have you, and then by the time they're beyond 18, they're finding themselves in the life? My other question to you is, what made you decide to share that had happened to you? Because again, I didn't realize until last year about the survival sex that I did when I was 20. I am with a mental health clinic that I work there, and I'm trying to implement trafficking awareness and getting questions in for the intake for potential victims or under the age of 18 and above the age of 18. So they want me to do trainings, and I didn't know. Someone said to me, you may want to think about whether you share your own personal story. I may want to make it like a third person. I knew someone very well, they were trafficked, and why I can understand this information that I'm presenting and training on. However, I feel that I do want to share my story because maybe that'll help someone else come forward, right? So how do you approach something like that?
Well, there's about 4 questions in there, and they're all really, really good questions. And
Sorry.
I'm going to try to remember them all and answer them all.
Okay.
So you mentioned that at age 20, the survival sex, which is basically, if you don't do this, you're going to die, kind of thing.
Correct. It was an exchange for rent. It was exchanged for.
And that is definitely trafficking. And that the example that I gave was the exchange for substances, but anything that you have to, like, your shelter was going to be taken away if you didn't do that. So yes, that's absolutely trafficking. To address the things leading up to that, and please, I'm gonna preface it with, if I put this in a way that in any way sounds like I'm judging or anything, please, interrupt me, because I am absolutely not. I'm just trying to explain it, and sometimes the words come out unintentionally harsh or whatever, and I don't ever want to do that. So the events leading up to it, and like being molested, being groomed by your mother's boyfriend, any of those sort of instances that are horrific sexual abuse, they don't constitute trafficking. However, they made you vulnerable to be trafficked at 20, because it became sort of an accepted norm, even if it wasn't in the forefront of your brain, an accepted norm. Somewhere back here, it was like, okay, well, that happened, and this is something that I gotta do it or I'm gonna live on the streets kind of thing. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. The thing about being groomed at 11 is he would say, I will not, you know, discipline your brothers, won't spank your brothers. They used to take those rods that you use on the blinds and spank us, right? Very painful. And he would say, you know, if you let me do this, then I will not hurt your brothers, right? So isn't that exchange of
Well, that adds a whole another angle, and so basically you have to engage in sexual acts to prevent your brothers from being hurt. So that is coercion and force. So that changes the whole picture. Does that make sense?
oh my
Because
gosh, wow.
because you it's forced to prevent your brothers from being hurt.
Right.
It's not just two people involved. It's, you know, you must do this or this will happen. And that's the coercion.
I never, how do you deal with that? I mean, I'm 52 and all of a sudden I'm realizing, oh my gosh, all these different parameters to the abuse that I experienced. I'm taking what happened to me and why I have such a passion for helping victims of trafficking and sex abuse is because I want to take what happened to me, turn it around for good and help someone else. So I'm able to put one foot in front of the other because of that. How did you come to say, wow, I was trafficked? What do I do with this?
The a lot of mental health help. I went to 3 or 2 specialty trauma programs. One I went to twice, and one I went to once out of the state for inpatient stays. They weren't like emergency hospitalizations, they were planned inpatient stays. And a lot of, I mean, they were specifically designed for sexual trauma. And in order for me to be able to freely talk about, you know, my history and talk to other people and to comfortably tell my story, and, you know, I've years and years and years and years of getting help. And the piece about whether or not you tell your story, if you're telling it to, it's a very slippery slope as to whether, I mean, I don't know that I've ever told my story to a client. Like, that's a boundary that I wouldn't cross. I may, you know, say to a client, you know, well, I was in foster care, that kind of thing, but I would never, you know, in that therapeutic relationship is not a place where I would tell this story. If they happen to see something like this and ask me about it, it's not something I would have a big discussion about. Even adult clients, I'd be happy to talk to them about trafficking, but not about my particular story. And even with colleagues, you know, it's like, if you want to see my story, go to YouTube. But you know, it's not as a part of a training. I mean, it's little bits and pieces if it ties in with but not details. Never details, because you risk becoming so vulnerable, and that's not something that I want to be at work.
Right. So when you say details, so if I was to say I was trafficked, is that appropriate, or do I just leave it all out?
I think this is probably a discussion maybe like you would want to have with, I don't know if you're licensed or whatever, but maybe if you have a mentor,
Okay.
or if you have a supervisor, you're in supervision or something like that.
Yeah, I'm meeting with the CCO next Wednesday and I'll talk to her about it. That was
Yeah,
good.
I think that's
Okay.
probably the best person to guide you on that.
Okay. Sorry to take the whole
No,
questionnaire meeting.
We had one other question here. So how can you get involved to promote awareness in the community?
that's a great question. There are a lot of groups around. There's actually a statewide kind of task force group that's just forming based on some laws that were passed last General Assembly. Safe Harbor is if you call their business line, they have opportunities to volunteer. If you just kind of like go online and look for, human trafficking or human sex trafficking, there's, a lot of places will come up. I know Chesterfield County has a large network of volunteers. There's a Impact, IMPACT. They do a lot of education-based stuff. The resources that you see on the screen are more if you need help yourself. And I can do a little bit more research rather than say, hey, Google it, and get those resources to Jennifer and Heather.
And I also am adding in chat here a couple of names of some programs. Melissa, you mentioned something about inpatient programs. While I don't know if they're specific to trafficking itself, but there are some trauma programs across the country. And I also, so there's one that I know of closer to us that's Dominion Hospital with a trauma PSY program. And then various others, Shepherd Pratt in Maryland, Psychiatric Institute of Washington. Then you get further out, there's River Oaks, Louisiana.
So Silver Hill is not too far.
Okay. Know that one. Thank you.
I think it's in Delaware, Connecticut.
Okay.
One of those little states up north of here.
All right. So yeah, somebody placed ended up in a direct chat, but there's an organization out of Richmond called Richmond Justice Initiative.
Yes.
Yeah.
I believe that's the one I think they're in Chesterfield, I believe.
Yeah, I think so too. They do a lot of awareness work.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for whoever put that in there. It's way better than there's an organization out of Chesterfield. It's much more helpful.
And then
they're very organized as well. So
and there is talk of another program coming to the county, offering support and or shelter for situations regarding trafficking as well, but we do not have details at this time.
There's there's a one similar to Safe Harbor in Hanover County. Is it Safe Haven?
Yes, Safe Haven. Okay, any other questions?
The SAMHSA website has a section on, and also TW, To Right Love on Her Arms, has a help section on human trafficking as well. TWOHA.
Okay. I want to thank you, Melissa, for your time today, for allowing us to be together, and appreciate all that you brought to this room. I also wanted to let people know I really began to get to know Melissa through If You Could See Me. So if you have seen, if you haven't heard of that, I will put that over in chat. Ifyoucouldseeme.com, and a place to share stories. I don't know if you want to mention briefly anything about that, Melissa.
I guess I should show the last slide.
Yeah.
Which, thank you
There
for
you go.
everybody's attention and wonderful questions. That's Robin's Hope, but of course you have their contact information if you're here, I would assume. And that's my email, Melissa at ifyoucouldseeme.com. And If You Could See Me is a organization that promotes reducing or eliminating the stigma around mental health through storytelling. And Heather and I are storytelling sisters we were in the same group. And it's a process so that you're not just hung out there to, basically word vomit and leave, that it's a community and that you have support as you do, like you're together once a month for about 6 months, and so you have support while you're formulating what you're going to do and putting together your 6 or 7 minutes of your entire life. And it's very, I guess, cathartic to kind of be up there and claim your power. And it's kind of the best way I can put it. So if you're interested in that, it's basically, if put a www instead of my name.
I've added it to chat for you.
So, but it's cool stuff.
Well, thank you again, Melissa, and check out the resources.
Can I ask something real quick? Sorry, ladies. Can you go over again when you're going to have another meeting like this?
We don't have it planned yet. Like, we don't have the official date and or the specific topic. The topics change. We will have one in April. We just don't have that nailed down yet. So please feel free to either go to our website and sign up. We'll send emails when we know when that's going to take place. And or yeah, keep an eye on, we're on Facebook, as well as Eventbrite and all of that. So definitely, if you get on our contact list, you'll get something.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Great.
You both are amazing. Thank you for taking the time to answer questions. That's great. Thank you. Namaste.
Thank you to everybody who attended. We've got lots of thank yous, Melissa.
I appreciate the opportunity to share space with everyone. Thank you. And don't forget your mask for the screen.